My name is Finlay. I work as an environment artist here at Rivet Games. Route building is the title that's given to the role. What that consists of is you are in charge of a specific area of the route. Your job is to manually place assets where they're supposed to be in the game. You're meant to sculpt the terrain into a way that's usable. You're also in charge of placing catenary, anything that's track specific, as accurately as you possibly can, based on assets that are provided to you by the art team. So you're constantly dropping down to track height, trying to have a look and see what the player is actually going to see, making sure it makes sense, and more importantly just making sure there are no bugs, making sure there's nothing obvious that stands out as an error when you're down at track height in the game. Kind of construct the route based on real life reference and also things that we import into the engine. We're working on the Gotthardbahn route at the moment in Switzerland. It's a very mountainous route, very iconic, gets a lot of tourism. So today what I was working on was continuing through with my tiles, trying to construct my area based on a tile map that's built at the beginning of the project. And a tile map is basically the entire route put together on a spreadsheet, broken up into 1 kilometre square tiles. Each person is colour coded to an area. For example, my section is purple. Green is basically when they're signed off, when they have everything like the overhead wiring, all the catenary in place, passenger setups and scenarios are complete as well. So they're basically good enough to be played by the player and ship. We don't tend to cross over into each other's sections very often. So if you have one artist working in a different way to another, it's going to be very obvious when you've passed over into their section. So everyone needs to be working in a very similar manner, similar pace and to a similar detail level. Another useful tool that we have is we're able to visualize this tile map in the actual editor. So if I jump down now to one of my tiles, you can see here that there is an actual physical tile boundary floating above the terrain, and it actually manipulates itself based on where the terrain is going. So you can see here that the tile boundary goes all the way up the hill, along and down. This is where the tile boundary ends. This is where my work starts and carries on, and someone else's work will continue from here as well. We have Google Earth in the studio. It helps us a lot to see physically where roads go in relation to the track, how rivers wind through the terrain, where there's a big build-up of foliage and infrastructure. But with it in the engine, we're able to overlay it onto our existing terrain, and we can line up things like roads and infrastructure, farm buildings, a lot of foliage and things like this. But having Google Earth makes our job a lot easier, lining up specific buildings and roads and knowing exactly where bridges and roads cut under. When it comes to placing the assets, we have a library that we use in the editor. We have all different styles of building, and we just keep adding to this catalogue on every route so that the artists have more in their arsenal to use on each tile. These assets are built by our art team. We try not to buy in assets, mainly because each location we do is quite bespoke and requires a little bit more love and attention to try and make it look like the region. So you can see here that we've placed a lot of foliage, a lot of which is 3D, it's more high fidelity, it fits with the region, and as we become further away from the track, almost very quickly, we start seeing 2D trees that aren't going to take up a lot of memory or power on people's machines. It means the game will run quicker, faster, less likely to crash. By the time the route building is complete, we hope to have scenarios, audio, lighting, and passengers in place, everything that's intensive for the game to ship and be playable by the players. As far as the route building is concerned, at that point we're in bug fixing mode. Anything that comes back from gameplay or the forums, which is a problem, stands out as an issue or a bug, we have to go back in and fix. Usually it's all hands to the deck. The tile map doesn't generally hold us back from working in other people's sections at that point, because we're just trying to get a published and finished route out the door. This section of the route is Erzfeld. It's probably one of the most dense track parts of the route. As a kind of consequence of that, the OHLE and the catenary is very complex. Part of our job is getting that spot on. It's where a lot of time ends up being spent to try and replicate it as as much as we possibly can from real life. We use a lot of video reference from the front of the cab, a recording going down the route, and we will actually look at that side by side with the editor, try and line up where the catenary is supposed to go in conjunction with the masts and different types of hangers. We try and get it as good as we possibly can get it in the time that we have. If it's there, it implies that the train is electric. You can imagine with anything with power, if you take the batteries out, it'll stop. It needs to be there for realism's sake more than anything. If a player is driving an electric train and suddenly the catenary runs out, they're expecting that train to stop. If it keeps going, it breaks the realism, and it's not really good enough for a simulator-based game to get that kind of stuff wrong. So that's why we spend so much time on it.